So, what we about to look at, we're gonna look at some why Africans were historically viewed as a threat. And like I said, when I do these type of stuff, like I'm not being culturally biased about anything. This is just me researching stuff, looking at documentaries and stuff. So I want you guys to enjoy that experience with me. It's just, what I find is what I find interesting. So I want to share what I find interesting with you guys. And just, we learn about this stuff together because this is stuff that we don't know. All right. Why Africans were historically viewed as a threat.
Made a fortune off stolen songs. Who framed Billie Holiday?
It seems
Keep watching for more 50s music horrors. It's not exactly a secret that record companies have gone to great lengths.
Okay, that's the wrong one. Yeah, this is stuff I figured out that I should look at, while I was on break, and I felt like this is for me, for sharing with you guys, history. We all love listening to history, listening to the stuff that we don't know. So,
as though everywhere Africans or Afro-descended people are. It seems as though everywhere Africans or Afro-descended people are, no matter the geographical location, they've experienced some form of oppression, discrimination, or prejudice. This has been going on for quite some time. Some scholars have attempted to figure out why this is the case, and some have come up with some interesting explanations. From my studies, it seems as though Africans and their descendants across the globe historically have been viewed as some sort of threat. And so today, I wanted to talk about some of the potential reasons as to why this.
So, and I want to bring light to that. So, there's a stigma that, a lot of us black folks talk about why, when you hire security, they always hire big black men as security because there's a natural sense of threat, I guess. And we always try to figure it out, but you only hire them because they black, because they they socially engineered people to be scared of black folk. So look, and I'm just saying that this is the conversations we have in our community, stuff that we don't really talk about with people outside of our race. But that's the things that we feel and we vocalize to ourselves, but people tend to never understand that. But that's just that. I mean, it is what it is. But let's go.
Today, I wanted to talk about some of the potential reasons as to why this may be the case. What up, African world? It's Home Team here, and welcome back to another video of African history, culture, and worldview. By supporting this channel on Patreon, you're helping in the creation of these videos and supporting this content. If you'd like access to full courses and sources, or you simply want to show your support, you may do so by clicking the Patreon link in the description box below. To begin, this video should be taken lightly, because this will just be my personal opinion on the topic based on my own analysis of world history. Ultimately, there is no conclusive answer to this question, as we can't get into the minds of non-Africans.
So for those people who like to rant about stuff in the comments, this is entirely his opinion. But this is actually my first video watching him, so I'm gonna really, keep my ears in tune for anything that I hear that might not make sense. But depending on what I said at the beginning, I really want to hear what he has to say.
All I can do is highlight some patterns and draw some conjectural conclusions. Also, this video is not intended to be some sort of plea for empathy or acceptance from outside of the African diaspora. It's simply intended to be considered as a working model, showing how history evolved into what it is today as it concerns our current social, political, and economic condition as Afro-descended people. I really appreciated the perspectives you all gave in my last video, and so I'm hoping that we can do the same. So let's begin. Despite questions concerning the reliability of Greek scholars and historians like Diodorus Siculus and Herodotus, their work highlights a very important narrative that did exist in ancient times. Whether their words about Africa were true or not, they expose what the common discourse was in ancient times amongst elites, an ancient commentary that influenced later periods. Some of the ancient narratives suggest the belief, or at least the consideration, that Africans were the first people and also that they were among the first civilized.
Whoa, wait, you mean the first civilized people? Hmm. So I thought we didn't get civilized to the Renaissance.
First people and also that they were among the first civilized. Now the Ethiopians, as historians relate, were the first of all men, and the proofs of this statement, they say, are manifest, for that they did not come into their land as immigrants from abroad, but were natives of it, and so justly bear the name of autochthons, is, they maintain, conceded by practically all men. Furthermore, that those who dwell beneath the noonday sun were, in all likelihood, the first to be generated by the earth, is clear to all, since inasmuch as it was the warmth of the sun which, at the generation of the universe, dried up the earth when it was still wet and impregnated it with life, it is reasonable to suppose that the region which was nearest the sun was the first to bring forth living creatures.
So basically, the place with the highest elevation on the earth would be the place where they first made man. So I think it's already been scientifically proven that the first man was black. But Theodorus, like, this man really said that the Ethiopians, as historians relate, were the first of all men, and the proofs in this statement they say are manifest. So you trying to say that they were generated by the earth, that kind of brings back that correlation in the Bible that you are made from the dust of the earth. What color is dust from the earth? What color is the dust of the earth from Africa? It's a different color. If you look at any maps of Africa and you look at the ground, it's like a ruddy red color. But it's, and but anyway, I don't want to get into that. But in the ancient times, so we talking about times maybe a few thousand years before us. We don't know how long this was. You talking about they knew that? So how are we as Americans with this Western thought? How are we able to refute things like that when the people before us bring forth such information? And this is typically not biased information, you know? So I want y'all to think about that. Think about some things that may come up when you hear a statement like that.
I find it fascinating that a Greek scholar came to a similar conclusion as we did concerning the origin.
Pretty much. There's been I'm not sure, Supreme Kai, but it's been told that in other documents that I can't recall right now the source. So I got to be careful with what I'm saying to y'all. But as to answering Supreme Kai's question, yes.
Origin of humans, placing them on the African continent. Echoes of this narrative survived into more modern times.
Right.
One of the most popular Orientalists, known today as the general title Middle Eastern Studies, was a man named Constantine de Volney of the 18th century. Here's what he has to say.
So the 18th century would be the 1700s, if I'm not sure?
We have the strongest reasons to believe that the country neighboring to the tropic, Sudan and southern Egypt, was the cradle of the sciences, and of consequence that the first learned nation was a nation of blacks, for it is incontrovertible that by the term Ethiopians, the ancients meant to represent a people of black complexion, thick lips, and woolly hair. Despite what our perspective is today, people in ancient times and even some of the earliest observers concluded that humanity's oldest civilizations and people were Africans. It's important to note that this perspective was only recently challenged. I think if we use this ancient perspective and the perspective proposed by de Volney,
so what are you guys thinking about when you hear statements like that?
we can certainly see the beginning stages of how African people came to be viewed as a threat, because the implications of being the oldest human people possessing the oldest civilizations is obvious.
So when you say the oldest civilizations, like when we and then sometimes like that first like the type of questions that I talk about, like if we're to be the oldest civilization, wouldn't you think we be the richest civilization too? Because the oldest civilizations have the best knowledge about the earth because they was there about the beginning. And I'm talking about whether this was any culture outside of black folks. Say it was the Asian culture or Chinese, that ancient Chinese that were the civilizations of the earth, earlier civilizations. So what do we have to learn from them that we can bring forth now? Because it seems like the more modern time is trying to erase what the ancients were and trying to retell a story of what the ancients were. You know what I'm saying? There's a passage in Proverbs that talk about go back to the old way. I might be misquoting, but go back to the old way, the way of your fathers. You know what I'm saying? There was a way about the earth that everybody knew about. So it makes you think about like, are we actually doing the right thing now?
A community of 70,000 people living in a city which was completely planned before the first house was built.
Sorry. But that's an interesting question. That's a very interesting question. Right, right.
The second reason why African people may have been viewed as a threat plays on the previous ancient model. Because of the narrative advanced by ancient writers and their modern contemporaries, a primordial fear of genetic annihilation inevitably developed. So the thought process could possibly be the following. If these Africans are the oldest humans who possibly spread throughout the planet, then humanity can easily go back to its original African mold. Even though it may sound odd, this was a thread of thought in the psychology of the one-drop rule, which pretty much stated that if anyone had one drop of African blood, then they have corrupted the non-African blood and therefore should be considered black or Negro.
Pretty much. Like there's a saying in our community that says like even if you light skinned, they still consider you black. You know, and that's something that my grandfather told me, you know what I'm saying? So it don't matter what complexion you are. If you know, and we know that some people can pull off that complexion, but it's the thing, you know, like why are we fearing folk for who they are? You know what I'm saying? That's what I have to ask towards the people who created these things or created these thought processes. Like why is there such a fear of genetic annihilation basically?
The non-African blood and therefore should be considered black or Negro. It seems clear that this idea was developed to identify African ancestry in whatever color or phenotype it came in. This identification would then lead to oppressing that individual, keeping them in the same denigrated state as other black people so that they would not have to compete economically, socially, politically, and especially genetically. However, this idea of genetic annihilation was not present amongst all European ethnic groups. In Latin America, for example, the Spanish and the Portuguese seemed to have children with their enslaved African women and even claimed them, creating a new class and ethnicity. These individuals, for the most part, had privilege and access to the goods and services the society could offer.
So pretty much the house Negro term.
This also seems to be true amongst the Arabs to a degree. The Arab slave trade was just as brutal and dehumanizing as the Atlantic slave trade, and they certainly had children with enslaved African women. Some of these children navigated the world as an Arab because they adopted the identity and the culture of their Arab father in full. Some of the Moors reflected this reality of Arab and African parentage, but again, identifying in full with a non-African father. But at the same time, many Arabs perpetuated the culture of eunuchs among their enslaved Africans, seemingly to rid themselves of that genetic threat. So there does seem to be some duality there. All in all, the idea of Africans posing a genetic threat did not apply to all, but was unique to some non-African groups with imperial power. Our final threat seems to come from the fact that the African continent holds so many resources. And
True. That's why you see this whole fight about trying to gain control of the resources in Africa. That's why China's there. That's why America is there. Like that's why you see shades of this thing happening right now. This stuff has been happening for years, but it's barely been in the news. The only thing you hear in the news about Africa is, you know what I'm saying, through church or the news saying war is happening in Africa and the Sudan, and this militia group is fighting this militia group. It ain't nothing peaceful about the news in Africa. So it's kind of weird.
And these resources ultimately translate into wealth. It's no secret that many modern-day nations want to control the resources coming out of Africa, and they do a good job at it. This was certainly true in ancient and medieval times. I think the Arabs were well aware of this when they first encountered the Ghana and Mali empires. Muslim writers spoke about what they heard from the merchants who traveled to Ghana and its adjacent civilizations. It is no exaggeration to say that the Arabs were very impressed with the wealth of the Ghana Empire. The first writer to mention the Ghana Empire was an astronomer named Al-Fazari shortly after the year 800 AD. He referred to the Ghana Empire literally as the land of gold. A century later, Ibn Hakel described the king of Ghana as the richest sovereign on earth, for he possesses great wealth and reserves of gold that have been extracted since early times to the advantage of former kings and his own.
Wow.
Ibn Hakel also writes in his description,
and get it, we just talking about resources,
of Sidra Massa concerning its trade across the Sahara and with Ghana. I saw a bill in Adugas certifying a debt owed to one of them of the people of Sidra Massa by one of the traders of Adugas, who was himself of the people of Sidra Massa, and the sum of 42,000 dinars. I have never seen or heard anything comparable to this story in the East. I told it in Al-Iraq, in Fars, and in Khorasan, and everywhere it was regarded as a novelty.
Whoa.
As Sheikh Ante Diop says, Africa was so distinguished in the world for its legendary wealth that it led the Arabs to say, against the camel's mange use tar, and against poverty make a trip to the Sudan. This speaks
Sudanese kingdoms being the most richest in the earth because of gold. It really makes me think. It really makes me think if the most disgruntled people on this planet are Africans and Black Americans. And I know they really don't try to put those two together, but if you thought about who we were in the ancient times and versus who we are today, we are just shells of who we supposed to be. Just shells, man. It's kind of disheartening to hear that. It's very disheartening to hear that. And how do y'all feel about that? Like, it makes me feel weird in a way, being somewhat genetically connected to that a little bit. But just
volumes as to how Africa was perceived. Everyone who knew about its wealth wanted a piece of it. As we can see, the Arabs encouraged it, making a proverb out of it. And Mansa Musa's visit to Cairo, displaying his vast wealth and power, certainly oohed and awed, but it simply gave more reason to heighten fears of a black planet, if you will. Because everyone knew that access to wealth and resources consolidates and increases power.
right.
Period.
So basically, you got the world leaders who are in power now because they have access to all the resources. With Africa being one of the most resourceful places on the planet, that's how you just follow the money. Follow the money and see what that is connected to. Obviously. And this is why I believe every nation can have their piece of the pie, but we just got people who want all the pie instead of just sharing and just letting that nation have its wealth for themselves. You know what I'm saying? Like every part of the earth, I believe, houses some kind of resources that can support those people that live there. So you got people who are basically ball hawking all the resources. So you think of, when I think about the black community today, we have access to no resources. That's why we have no economy in our community. You know what I'm saying? And I know we talk about this, how we all together and stuff like that, but let's talk about this in the context of the video, okay? You know what I'm saying? Like if we're all from some place on this planet. If every place on this planet had access to their resources and control of their resources, like for example, say Japan is king of technology, but in South America is in need of technology, but they don't have banana trees basically. That's how you get trade basically. Okay, we want some bananas, we want some of your tech, share some of that. And that's how we begin to create trade, basically. So a resource for resource. And I think that's the way it's supposed to be originally designed to be. I don't think any nation on this planet is supposed to be in dire poorness unless it's some deserted island that we don't know where it is, you know?
And whoever owns it controls it. And it's clear that
Where mine is from, I would say I'm not sure because I have roots of Native American, and I know my Native American family or Native American side of myself is from South Carolina. And but I don't know. I probably have to do a DNA thing.
that Africans were deemed as the owners, first from the Arab perspective and later the European.
But you see how when they saw those stone statues, the nose is always going?
This was indeed a fatal combination for Africans who were seemingly more interested in other forms of capital rather than world domination. And so, this history paints an interesting picture of why Africans and their descendants may be viewed as a threat. The early narrative of Africans being the first humans, the limited yet ever-present idea of genetic annihilation, and finally, the perceived advantage of immediate access to wealth and resources made Africans a threat to their neighbors, the Arabs and the Europeans, both of which took action as soon as they could. I believe this is why there was so much pushback against Pan-African movements and economic powerhouses like Black Wall Street and others.
Right.
Because if people of African descent all across the globe can consolidate a unified identity, they can then become owners again. Anyway, guys, like I mentioned before, this is just my own personal analysis of world history. I really hope some will be willing to share their thoughts and add or take away from the ideas presented. As mentioned before, I'm hoping this can be used as a sort of model for us in the diaspora, so that we can understand our world a little better, bring about less confusion, and be able to process why we see the things that we do. Well, I'm all out, guys. If you like these videos and want to help in its continued production, consider supporting the home team on patreon.com. The link is in the description box below. Know thyself. Remember your ancestors. Peace.
Said, know thyself, remember your ancestors. A lot of people say there's no point in looking back at the past because if we keep doing that, we can't move forward. I've talked to many people about stuff like this, and people just say, move forward. And I'm just like, nah, we can't. We can't, because if we just move forward without learning, then we're just destined to reassume the same mistakes.